Good evening, Africa. Tonight we bring you breaking news that is shaking the very foundation of West Africa's agricultural and economic future. In a bold and historic move, Burkina Faso's president, Captain Ibrahim, has officially banned the importation of foreign food products, declaring that the time has come not just to talk about food sovereignty, but to live it. That's right, imported rice, flour, canned goods, cereals, foreign dairy all now face a sweeping prohibition. The message is clear: Burkina Faso will feed itself with its own soil, its own hands, and its own heart. This announcement, made from the heart of Ouagadougou, has already sent ripples through international trade channels and diplomatic missions. Western food exporters are furious, global corporations are panicking. But for the people of Burkina Faso and many Pan-African thinkers across the continent, this is a long-awaited declaration of economic independence. Let us be absolutely clear. This is not about isolation. This is about liberation. President stood before his people and declared that no proud nation should rely on ships from Europe to feed its children, while its own land remains fertile and its people remain hungry, in his exact words, and we quote, "How can we speak of sovereignty when our dinner tables are filled with food grown thousands of kilometers away while our farmers suffer? This is not just about food, this is about dignity, pride, and survival. Burkina Faso will rise with what it grows. From now on, our strength will come from our soil, not foreign supermarkets. This isn't just policy, it is philosophy. Understands the deeper war not of guns, but of dependency. Because for decades, Africa has been told that it cannot feed itself, that its grains are not good enough, that its livestock, its seeds, its techniques are outdated. And so, billions of dollars worth of foreign food floods our markets, while African farmers rot in poverty. And imported biscuits become more accessible than millet, yam, cassava, or local maize. But this narrative is being dismantled, slowly, surely, and now, powerfully. The president's announcement came alongside a massive state program to invest in rural agriculture, providing indigenous seeds, farming equipment, organic fertilizer, and access to water for thousands of local cooperatives. There are reports that the military itself will help in logistics and infrastructure, transforming old colonial era supply chains into pan-African agricultural networks. And why is this important? Because food is not just nutrition, food is power. Control what people eat, and you control their health. Control where food comes from, and you control their economy. That's why President is not just banning imports, he's breaking the chain of dependency that has kept Africa bowed for far too long. It is a bold strategy, one that will not be without challenges. There may be price fluctuations. Some urban areas may face short-term shortages. The Western media will scream food crisis and isolationism, but let's not be fooled. This is the necessary pain of birthing a new system, a system where Africans do not need foreign approval to nourish themselves. And this is not just about Burkina Faso. Across the continent, leaders and thinkers are watching. From Mali to Niger, from Chad to Guinea, from Tanzania to Ghana, farmers, ministers, youth groups, and entrepreneurs are asking the same question. If Burkina Faso can grow its own future, why can't we? The Pan-African implications are massive. If other countries follow suit, the continent could finally shift from being the world's food dumping ground to the world's food powerhouse. A continent that exports not just cocoa and coffee in raw form, but processed, finished, proudly African products. President is not calling for war. He is calling for discipline, unity, and self-respect. And while foreign investors may frown, African mothers, farmers, and youth have already started applauding. This moment will be remembered not just as an economic reform, but as a cultural revolution, a spiritual reawakening of the African farmer, the African kitchen, the African palate. Burkina Faso is taking the first bite of its own destiny and the rest of the continent. The question now is not if they will follow, but when. Stay tuned as we bring you exclusive reactions from local farmers, agro-entrepreneurs, and regional leaders. Because today, the seed of African sovereignty has been planted, and believe us, it will grow.
Welcome to Talk of Africa 360, your source for insightful news, analysis, and thoughtful commentary. If you value informed perspectives and fact-based reporting, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss an update. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is based on reliable public sources and credible online information. It is intended strictly for educational and analytical purposes. We do not promote or endorse political violence, hate speech, or any form of discrimination. Our goal is to inform, not to inflame. Thanks for being here. Let's stay informed together.
Good evening, Africa. Welcome to African Narrative, where we give voice to the stories shaping our continent's destiny. Tonight, we share a landmark moment in African self-determination, a bold proclamation from the heart of West Africa. President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso has issued a sweeping decree. Effective immediately, the importation of food into Burkina Faso is banned. In its place, a new national vision begins, where homegrown agriculture and locally made food products become the cornerstone of economic sovereignty. This is not rhetorical flourish. It is a strategic pivot. These imports may have seemed convenient, but they have come at a high price: national debt, vulnerability to global supply shocks, and the systematic undermining of domestic farmers. A declaration that says, loud and clear, African plates should be filled by African farms. We trust the ingenuity of our women, the vigor of our youth, and the resilience of our smallholder farmers who feed our nation. We reject the idea that the world must provide food for us when we possess fertile land, rich heritage, and capable people. Tonight, we unpack what this means for Burkina Faso, for Africa, and for the future of food security and economic liberation across the continent. It is a cultural declaration as much as an economic one. For months, the government has prioritized subsidies and support for local cooperatives, small-scale millers, seed banks focused on indigenous grains, and mobile food markets to bring products directly from farms to urban consumers. These goods will be eligible for public procurement in schools, hospitals, and government facilities. For decades, Burkina Faso, like many African nations, has relied heavily on imported grains, refined oils, dairy products, and packaged foods. He has declared that Burkina Faso will no longer tolerate the hemorrhage of foreign food capital. When global food prices spiked, Burkina Faso's food import bill ballooned, forcing the national currency to weaken, inflation to rise, and families to struggle. When wheat from Ukraine or France failed to arrive, or when traders refused to sell to governments they saw as unpredictable, millions went hungry. Meanwhile, local producers, left unprotected, fell deeper into poverty or abandoned their farms entirely. These enterprises will be tax-exempt for the next 5 years, supported with low-interest financing, and featured in national markets branded Made in Faso. We must bake the bread ourselves. That metaphor reverberates with symbolic force. People packaging peanut butter, local vegetables, fermented beverages, dairy products, and baked goods will now have national backing. Government contracts are now reserved for Faso-origin producers. Exporters of indigenous products, like fonio, shea butter snacks, or hibiscus drinks, will receive promotional support and duty-free entrance into regional markets. Instead, he is calling upon every farmer, business, community, and government body to mobilize behind a new era of home cultivation, local processing, and African culinary pride. Today, President Traore has drawn a line in the sand. It is awakening. He invoked the name of African farmers, of generations who tilled the land, of grandparents who knew the taste of local porridge and heirloom grains. He spoke of national pride. The colors of food on our plates should reflect our land, not foreign shelves. This decree is both economic and symbolic. It says, we trust our soil, our hands, our traditions. He urged them to transform traditional processing, to embrace packaging, to build cooperatives, to use digital marketplaces connecting rural producers to urban consumers. He asked investors, domestic and African, to fund silo infrastructure, mobile milling units, cold chains for dairy and vegetables, and branding platforms that elevate Burkina Faso produce across West Africa. That prices will rise temporarily. To them, he said, change is not painless, but stagnation is fatal. The choice is dignity over dependency, self-reliance over submission. The government must ensure inputs like fertilizers, transport, storage, and milling capacity are scaled up swiftly. Let us take a moment to visualize the significance. For when Burkina Faso grows, sells, and exports its agricultural surplus, it strengthens West African food systems as a whole. Burkina Faso is partnering with neighbors to create cross-border grain corridors, shared mills, and coordinated extension services. For too long, foreign foods have eclipsed local recipes. Instant noodles replaced porridge. Imported juices replaced fermented drinks. Steel and glass bottles replaced calabashes and clay pots. This vision frames food sovereignty as both economic necessity and cultural revival. Value-added production could grow from cottage industry to medium factories. Investors could build silos, cold chains, packaging lines, and logistics hubs. Slowly but surely, Africa could turn food importers into exporters, staple buyers into suppliers, food aid receivers into donors. Women's cooperatives could become exporters of peanut butter, cassava chips, bambara nut snacks, and gluten-free grains. It's about grassroots mobilization, market creation, cultural reawakening, and economic innovation. The ban is also a call to remember, to taste, to celebrate the richness of Burkina's culinary heritage. They know the calories they consume will circulate within the national economy. They know they are defending sovereignty with every bowl of porridge. They see food sovereignty not as isolation, but as integration of African producers. They know that if properly supported, their work will sustain national resilience, generate income, and preserve dignity. Customs duties on local grain products will be reduced to zero. Radio stations promote the Taste of Faso campaign, encouraging local stew recipes over instant noodles. It is confidence in our own land. A promise that Africa can feed itself, that Burkina Faso will define its path, that dependence on foreign food is unnecessary, and that the future of African nourishment should lie in African hands. Thank you for joining us on this journey of hope, hunger, and homegrown transformation. Good evening, and may your meals be nourishing, your country thriving, and your spirit unbowed by foreign dependence. City canteens now serve sorghum-based porridge labeled Made in Faso, aimed at students and civil servants. Public procurement contracts for schools, hospitals, army rations, and social programs are now reserved exclusively for local suppliers unless there is no suitable domestic alternative. And European vegetable oil now shares space with local sorghum, maize, millet, peanuts, shea butter, local honey, fermented dairy, and indigenous legumes. At markets across Ouagadougou, Bobo del Lasso, and smaller towns throughout the country, plates piled high with imported rice, powdered milk, imported noodles, margarine. Grain surplus from Zouandiogo province is moving to Bamako and Abidjan under AFCFTA arrangements. Shea butter processors in the southwest are packaging soaps and cosmetics for export to Ghana and Ivory Coast. The government will guarantee purchase of staple grains at set minimum prices, invest in irrigation where needed, distribute improved seeds of local varieties, and provide training for post-harvest handling and storage. Farmers now know there is a domestic market with predictable, secure pricing for their harvests. The president is not merely banning imports. He is mandating a national identity rooted in local bread, millet porridge, native sauces, and African-grown produce. This move builds on earlier reforms. One of the first tasks the government has mandated: ensure every primary and secondary city has at least 2 local grain processing cooperatives, food producers that mill millet, sorghum, fonio, maize, and package small sacks of flour under Burkina Faso labels. President Traoré has also launched an initiative to license hundreds of food incubation hubs, small kitchens where women-s groups turn local raw materials into sausages, pastries, peanut snacks, dairy yogurt, and juices. But why now? The timing is driven by deep frustrations. President Traoré, in his address, spoke plainly. We cannot beg for the crumbs of global food systems. Let us consider the consequences of this decision for different actors. For local farmers, this is a call to action. For urban consumers, this means adjusting expectations. Imported noodles and refined oils will vanish or become extremely costly. Instead, local stews made from millet, peanut butter sauces, fermented dairy meals, and local snacks, made by small bakeries in Ouagadougou or rural cooperatives, will become staples. That shift will require awareness campaigns promoting taste, hygiene standards, and affordability. For local food entrepreneurs, a new era of opportunity opens. For regional and continental trade, under the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, Burkina Faso's move strengthens intra-African commerce. Neighboring countries like Mali, Niger, Ivory Coast, Ghana, and Senegal can now export surplus grains or processed foods to Burkina Faso under duty-free arrangements. This builds African value chains rather than importing European goods. For the government, short-term challenge means long-term gain. Budget deficits may appear as subsidies shift from importers to local producers. But over time, the country keeps its foreign exchange reserve, strengthens its own food systems, and insulates itself from external market shocks. Food becomes not a vulnerability, but a pillar of national resilience. Of course, there are risks. Implementation must be vigilant. Imported goods may enter through smuggling channels or informal markets. Quality and safety standards must be maintained to prevent foodborne illnesses. Farmers need ongoing extension support, mechanization assistance, and post-harvest infrastructure. Urban consumers will need affordable, appealing local alternatives. They cannot feel this is just deprivation. But the determination is high. President Traore's speech emphasized, this is not austerity. He also called upon the youth, become agro-entrepreneurs, not food importers. The president left no room for halfway measures. Within 6 months, all import food licenses will expire or be revoked. He addressed critics head-on. Yes, some will say this is radical. That trade will suffer. Across Burkina Faso, changes are already visible. Women's cooperatives in Tasbonde and Kédougou are selling peanut butter and millet biscuits in Ouagadougou markets. Educational programs are teaching schoolchildren about local grains like fonio and bambara nut. This is not a temporary flourish. It is a structural revolution. Of course, implementation must be careful. Smugglers may try to bring imports through informal routes. Quality standards must be enforced to avoid health issues. The president has also recognized the role of regional cooperation. This rationale echoes the Pan-African spirit, not inward-looking nationalism, but outward-looking solidarity. We must also consider the spiritual dimension, the reclaiming of tradition and identity. When President Traoré said, "Our plates should reflect our fields," he meant that not only crops, but also culture must be rooted in our land. Looking ahead, if fully implemented, this policy could catalyze a profound transformation. Burkina Faso could become a regional hub for processed grains and staple foods, exporting flour, snacks, dairy, and beverages. Youth entrepreneurs could develop agro-tech tools, mobile apps to connect farmers to markets, digital payment platforms for cooperatives, drone mapping for crop planning. African governments could adopt similar models, each reclaiming food sovereignty and creating regional value chains. This shift requires bold leadership, and President Traore's announcement offers a roadmap. But it's not only about top-down decree. Yes, there will be growing pains, price spikes, distribution hiccups, pushback from import-dependent businesses. But success is possible if policy, infrastructure, and market culture evolve together. On the brighter side, Burkinabe farmers now have security. They know the government will buy their harvests. They know their produce will feed their fellow citizens. Urban families know they can eat clean, locally grown food. Exporters in West Africa now have access to a large, import substitute market. Welcome opportunity for African grain processors, bakeries, and beverage producers. And African investors, both on continent and in the diaspora, can see that food sovereignty equals investment returns. Tonight, as we bring this introduction to a close, let us remember that this ban is not a punishment. It is a promise. This is not isolation. It is empowerment. This is not deprivation. It is reconstruction. This is not fear of the outside world. And tonight, we bear witness to a pivotal moment, as Burkina Faso begins turning its plates into platforms for national renewal. This is African Narrative, the home of stories that matter, voices that empower, and futures that we shape ourselves. I am Andrew.
As reactions continue to pour in from across the continent, one thing is clear. Africa is demanding respect, sovereignty, and accountability. Was this just a diplomatic misstep or a deeper sign of shifting global alliances? We'll be watching closely. If you found this story important, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, unfiltered African news. This is Talk of Africa 360, telling the stories that matter.